total number of aircraft in Nigeria surged by 100% in 8 years. Dangote Refinery expects first crude in 2023. Oil dips on demand worries after unexpected U.S. crude yield. The program is Business Express, YouTube from Abuja, Nigeria's capital. I am Benny Adams, your guide. Good to have you join us. It's time to talk business. The national blockchain policy has been launched. With this, Nigeria embarks on full digitization journey to benefit from the blockchain technology market worth about $60 billion and predicted to value more than $1.7 trillion by 2030. Chidimandi Lisi reports that with this development, Nigeria becomes the first African country to have a national blockchain policy.
Almost 8 years of President's administration, a lot have been sunk in various agricultural programs to make Nigeria self-sufficient in food production. It is in a bid to get value for money expended that the Minister of Agriculture and Rural Development, Muhammad Mahmoud Abubakar, is visiting Kwara State to inspect the 3 strategic agricultural centers located in the state and see how billions invested in the centers are being utilized. These agricultural institutions are National Center for Agricultural Mechanization, NCAM, Agricultural and Rural Management Training Institute, ANTI, and Nigerian Stored Products Research Institute, NISPRI. At the National Center for Agricultural Mechanization, the Minister expressed satisfaction with the facilities inspected, while stressing the need for the incoming administration to consolidate on the gains recorded by President Muhammadu Buhari in agriculture.
It is not by accident that these 3 institutions are here, because their synergy will produce something much bigger than individually. And what I've seen here, honestly, I think we are busy looking for equipment, small equipment, or even small-sized tractors and everything outside Nigeria, China, or India. We have our China and India right here in Ilorin.
It's a great boost to us to continue in our resolve to ensure that we patronize homegrown mechanization technology.
The minister, who expressed satisfaction with what he met on ground in all the institutions visited, also commissioned some landmark projects at NCAM and NISPRI. Aisha Abubakar Yahaya.
And the Director General of the World Trade Organization, Ngozi Okonjo-Iweala, says oil and gas will no longer serve Nigeria as the main revenue source. She stated this at the 2023 Governors Induction for new and returning governors at the Presidential Banquet Hall in Abuja. According to her, the new and returning governors will have to explore other areas to raise revenues aside from oil and gas, as the sector is no longer what it used to be in terms of revenues. Dangote Refinery is anticipating the arrival of its first crude batch in June 2023. According to the report, a representative from the refinery revealed that they expect to commence processing this initial batch consisting of 500,000 barrels per day before gradually increasing production to 650,000 barrels per day in mid-2024. The report also highlights that a significant portion of the crude oil for the refinery will be sourced from Nigeria, a country with a production capacity of 2.5 million barrels per day. However, Nigeria has faced challenges in surpassing a daily output of 1.2 million barrels per day due to issues of insecurity, theft, strikes, and operational problems related to aging wells. Now, in continuation of our conversations towards a certain agenda for the incoming administration, Business Express is today taking a look at unemployment and economic growth. In its global economic outlook, the KPMG estimates that Nigeria's unemployment rate will rise further to 40.6% in 2023 from the fourth quarter of 2020 estimate of 33.3% figure by the National Bureau of Statistics. To discuss this alongside inflation figures is Professor Abiodun Adini. He is a public affairs analyst and a professor of communications at the Base University. Prof, good to have you join us on Business Express today.
Yeah, thank you. Thanks for having me.
Good. Prof, let's start with Nigeria's poverty index is one of the highest in the world. The NBS multidimensional poverty index says 133 million people, making up like 62.9% of the population, are multidimensionally poor. With the rising unemployment, like we've seen the figures in the background, don't you think the poverty level will also be going higher?
Yeah, definitely going higher, and of course this is obvious using different statistics, different parameters. Of course, it's been stated that 33% of Nigerians are unemployed. Beyond those who are unemployed, it's also the question of those who are supposedly employed, but are still in poverty. Those that the MBS or the labor organization will call in work poverty. So it just tells us that being employed is not just an end in itself, but it should ordinarily be an end, be a means to an end. And that means to an end means that you should have a level of satisfaction, you should be above poverty level. But of course, many of the so-called people who are employed are still in abject poverty because they still find it very difficult to make ends meet. And making ends meet means being able to cater for self, being able to pay your bills, care for your health care needs, care for the education of your wards, care for your housing needs, etc., etc. But hardly would you find a situation in this country where the wages of people are good enough, to take them home. They are never good enough to help their sustenance. People find different ways of moonlighting. People find different ways of getting by. And thanks again to the communal nature of the Nigerian, the African culture, where we tend to cater for ourselves, directly or indirectly, consciously or unconsciously, whether we like it or not. If not for this, of course, there will have been so much level of depression, and the question of suicide, frustration, depression will have been high. Cases of suicide will also have been on the increase, but even at that, we'll still see the downsides that's coming out of these kind of contradictions in the system. We see increase in insecurity, increased crime rate, hopelessness on the part of the youth, and the tendency for the youth to want to externalize their hope by wanting to leave the country. All these things are a byproduct of the artificial nature, or the downsides, the fact that there's no reality in the question of people being unemployed. Of course, MBS also came to tell us about multi-dimensional poverty some months ago, which tells us that, people are multi-dimensionally poor. They are unable to make ends meet in different regards, But of course, the arguments around what they are trying to do now, which we have had, I don't know if you are going to talk about it, in the question of trying to reclassify the unemployment figures away from the 33% using the latest ILO yardstick, such that by the time they use a different methodology to calculate the unemployment figure, we're going to have...
Prof, let me hold your thoughts on that. I was actually coming to the methodology where we get these figures, because the NBS in 2020, fourth quarter of 2020, was talking about 33.2 about that, and we're having other estimates from other sources. But before before that, what does it actually mean for someone to be unemployed? I'm asking this because we have concepts like underemployment also coming side by side.
I think there are different criteria really, and of course it varies from systems to systems, and is a matter of understanding. But the basic understanding we have is that somebody who is employable but is not able to find a job, is not able to earn a living on account of his ability to use his skills, his wherewithal, as the case could be, whether skilled or unskilled labor. He's fit as a fiddle probably, but there's no opportunity for him to harness the benefit of his fitness. So that's unemployment. Underemployment is when somebody is not able to maximize his potentials. It's his ability to work, Yes, he's engaged somewhat, but it's not engaged to the optimum in a situation where potentials still exist, where there's still the willingness of that person, to exert his potentials for maximum benefit. That's what I think unemployment is really.
Okay, Prof, let's talk to the methodologies. We see figures being churned out by NBS quarterly. We've just seen inflation figures come up. We keep having figures on unemployment and all of that. Can you give us insight into these methodologies in practice as well as academia? What should be the standards?
Yeah, I think I was there as an academic observer, when during the sensitization program, when an attempt was made to explain what this methodology is all about. It's about research methods, and of course, research method can vary. You can get a certain result, definite result, depending on the method you apply in situations. But before now, the method they adopted to realize the 33% of Nigerians being unemployed was one where they believe that if you're unemployed, you should not have a job that will engage you for up to 20 hours in a day, in the last 7 days or so, which is the period of reference. And of course, those calculated were usually those between the ages of 15 and 64. Remember this is very important, those between the ages of 15 and 64, and you should not have an opportunity to work for a minimum of 20 hours, But the new methodology is saying that, if you work for just 1 hour, it is possible to calculate it. So it shouldn't just be a minimum of 20 hours. 1 hour is fine. And of course, there are so many people who can point at who work maybe 45 minutes, 1 hour in a day, and probably they don't want to do any other thing. We have experts, who you can call upon to speak to you for 45 minutes. We have consultants, neurosurgeons who you bring to work for you, and you pay them hands-only just for under 45 minutes, 1 hour, and they are fine for some time. So this set of people were obviously excluded in the old methodology, but the new methodology seeks to include them. And of course, the question of the upper limit of those between the ages 15 to 64 is also going to be removed. Whereby it is those above age 15. Once you are above age 15, the upper cap is no longer there, and it will now be able to capture retirees who are still very, very productive. And of course, we have so many of them in this country, people who are above 40 that were not captured before, that were assumed to be unemployed. But we have retired generals, professors, consultants, surgeons, who are still doing fantastically well in their late 60s, 70s, and even 80. The system is still benefiting from them. These people were not captured beforehand, but they are now going to be captured in the new methodology. So the upper limit is removed. A lot more people will fall into the bracket. Okay, what about the important question of subsistence farmers? They were not involved before. It was assumed before that if you are doing subsistence agriculture, you are unemployed. Now it's going to be captured, which means that a lot more people are going to fall into that bracket. And finally, there's a question of underemployment. Before now, if you work between 20 to 40 to 39 hours and you can still work, it is said that you are probably you can still work and you can't find a work, you are probably said to be underemployed. But again, this is going to be expanded. So you see a redefinition. There are a lot more things that are involved that I may not be able to capture offhand, but essentially it's just reviewing the methodology, and in reviewing the methodology we're going to see a rate figure that is probably different, from the projections of industry, of people in the private sector, because MBS methodology is to use households, and I think they are the only ones, being a government agency, that has the capacity to deploy that kind of mechanism, because using households, they leverage on the statistics provided for them by the National Population Commission, and they move, in doing that, they are moving towards exactitude, some level of precision, harnessing the infrastructure and utility available to them, which private sector organizations cannot make. So private sector organizations may only be making projections, DEX to review projections, which may not be comparable with that of the MBS, without necessarily speaking for them.
Well, a quick one there. Yeah. This new methodology, how acceptable is it, and how soon are we going to have it in the mainstream?
Well, I think from what as you said, Prince Aderemi, you said they're still working on it, that they don't also know when the final release will come, but they're still working on it. The field work is still going on, and maybe at the appropriate time, when the final result is ready, or is ready to be released, they will do that, realizing that Nigeria is still one of the few African countries that is yet to adopt this methodology. 26 African countries have adopted it already after appropriate pilot testing, after appropriate piloting of the methodology. 26 African countries have adopted it, and Nigeria is still the only country that is yet to adopt it. And of course, after the COVID era, there was also the need for us, to come up with some other kinds of calculation against the background of so many activities in government, out of government, the dynamics of the economy, so many attempts, to reflate it, to boost different sectors, interventions by government. It is time that new measurement be done, to define actually what the exact figures actually are.
Well, I think there is really a need for a handshake between academics and industry. Thank you so very much, Professor Abiodun Adeyemi, for sharing your thoughts with us at this particular point in time. I believe this is a conversation we will get to continue from time to time.
Yeah, thank you very much for having me.
And moving on, Minister of Finance and National Planning Zainab Ahmed says Nigeria has watched the evolution of NTA from the initial mandate of disclosing extractive output and revenue to data mainstreaming, examination of contracts, and reporting of beneficial ownership, which she says has helped the government to save costs and recover lost resources. This was at the launch of the Gender and Environmental Reporting Frameworks for oil, gas, and mining sectors in Abuja.
And we have released a transparency portal which shows all of government expenditure at one point in the treasury. So when you visit the transparency portal, you can drill down to every spending that is above 5 million naira of government for every agency of government that is in the JPIS system.
We are proud to disclose data and information on environmental payments, impacts, monitoring and management, as well as information disclosure on gender parity, participation and employment in the extractive industry.
Secondly, the Petroleum Industry Act the content analysis we did with the Act shows a very wide disparity.
The Norwegian envoy to Nigeria is advocating a legislation that will include gender balance in all business transactions. This is as Nigeria ranks 123rd out of 143 countries on the global gender gap. This was at the launch of the Purple Book titled From Voices to Action for a Gender Inclusive Society in Abuja.
In Norway, it was decided by law that Norwegian companies that were on the stock exchange, they had to have a better gender balance.
It is projected that it will take at least 132 years to close the gender parity.
We do it to serve, and we don't care who takes the glory.
Gold prices steadied on Wednesday as investors fretted over prolonged U.S. debt limit negotiations, with a firmer dollar keeping prices in check. Spot gold ticked up 0.1% to $1,991 at 35 cents per ounce. U.S. gold futures were little changed at $1,995.20. Let's now see how other commodities are faring. Oil prices fell for a second day on Wednesday after a surprise rise in U.S. crude inventories stoked demand concerns on the heels of weaker than expected economic data from the United States and China, the world's two biggest oil consumers. Brent crude futures was 29 cents lower by 0.4% to $74.60 a barrel. U.S. West Texas Intermediate crude edged down by 32 cents, also 0.4% down to $70.55. Justice Ahmed of the Federal High Court, Court 5, Abuja, has set July 13, 2023 for the cross-examination of the last defense witness, Segun Arowolo, on allegations against Midland Capital Market Limited and its managing director, Sam Kwandi, bordering on operating as fund managers without registration by the Securities and Exchange Commission, among others. Midland Capital and Bandi are being accused of obtaining the sum of 40 million naira from one Patrick Ayabaliman under false pretense that they are fund managers and going to invest the money on his behalf under a guaranteed investment product. The Federal High Court in Abuja had previously ruled that Midland and its managing director Sam Bandi had a case to answer on allegations of falsely obtaining 40 million from a client. The judge thereafter adjourned the matter to July 13, 2023 for cross-examination of the witnesses. And taking a look at the market, it is a positive day for the stock market in Nigeria this Wednesday as the all share index appreciated by 52,580.86 basis points. Investors exchanged 680,000 shares, 708 million deals valued at 7.8 billion naira in 6,666 deals. The market capitalization also gained to close the day at 28.6 trillion naira. And now to the global scene. European stocks lower as U.S. debt ceiling talks overshadow market sentiment. Let's now join Neka Oko for an update.
Markets were mixed this Wednesday as investors keep an eye on debt ceiling negotiations stateside. The French CAC was down 0.14% in early trading. The German DAX led modest gains with a 0.25% uptick, while UK's FTSE was marginally positive. Asia-Pacific markets were also mixed as investors digested economic data from Japan and Australia. Hong Kong stocks saw a sharp sell-off in its final hour of trade, with Hang Seng Index trading 2% lower. Mainland China stocks also fell, with the Shanghai Composite ticking 0.21% lower, while Japan's Nikkei 225 bucked the trend and rose 0.84%, exceeding the psychological level of 30,000 and closing at 30,093.59. U.S. stock futures rose Wednesday as investors awaited news of development in the negotiations between congressional leaders and President Joe Biden on the U.S. debt ceiling. Futures tied to the Dow Jones Industrial Average added 0.28%, S&P 500 gained 0.24%, and Nasdaq 100 advanced 0.12%. Back home in Africa, stocks traded slightly higher in midweek trade, with most of the markets in green, while Namibia's overall index and Morocco's free float index ticked down.
Well, that's Business Express. Business Express returns tomorrow at 9:30 a.m. I am Benny Adams saying, have a good day.